Welcome to a new lesson. Let's look at the topics to be covered in this class. First topic is religion. What did the people at that time believe about God? Second, what are the problems in the society at that time? Third, we will see how the belief about God began to change and how this was good for everyone. What were some of the religious ideas of the people of that time? They believed not in one god but in many gods and goddesses. Can you see the pictures of the gods below? About people, they believe that all human beings must go through endless cycles of birth and rebirth. Can you see that cycle below? And one can only escape these cycles by good works. Here we can see an idea that the people had about themselves. What did the people believe about themselves? They believed that all human beings are to be treated differently. For example, if you are born into a rich family, you are very likely to get better treatment. That is, you may be respected very highly in society, and you could also enjoy many privileges, unlike the lower classes or the poorer sections of society. Can you see that rich family wearing good clothes and the poor beggar on their right side? As the people believed, they did. But this led to many problems in the society, and we will list some of the problems. First, there were many castes in the society, and each caste was treated differently. So that's what the first line is about: inequality or unequal social castes. You can see on the right, there's the high caste and the low caste, and the arrows are showing the relationship between the castes. Look, the low caste is serving the high caste, and the high caste, what do they do to the low caste? They're always troubling the low caste. And that's what is written in your text. The lower castes were oppressed by the upper castes. In the society at that time, there were 4 different castes. Do you remember their names from the previous lesson? They were the Brahmins, the Kshatriyas, the Vaidyas, and the Shudras. Well, the Brahmins were known as the priestly class, and they were the only people who could worship God. The Brahmin caste also performed too many rituals. Do you think it is correct to treat rich people and poor people differently? How did the people solve the problem of unfair treatment of people from different castes? In the medieval period, the people from high castes were treated better than the low castes. This problem can be removed only by rejecting the religious beliefs of that time. Then, the lower caste could be treated just like the upper caste, and that would make sure that all people in the society were treated equally. The diagram on the right shows the high caste was previously treated better than the lower caste. Then there was a change, and everyone is treated the same. Now, that's a good thing. The second problem was that the Brahmins were the only people who could worship God, and this meant that many people could not worship God themselves. The only solution is to change their religious belief. According to the teachings of Buddha or Jainism, it was possible to break free from the cycle of birth and rebirth by one's own effort. Some people even started to believe in only one supreme God who could free humans from the bondage of that cycle. And there was only one condition: the person must love God with all his heart. This is called Bhakti. The teachers of Bhakti or Sufism wanted to free the right of worship of God from the Brahmins. Hence, this problem too was solved by a change in the religious belief of that time. The third problem was the people were unhappy that Brahmins performed too many sacrifices. The only way to solve this problem was to reject the idea that many sacrifices and complicated rituals could please God. Finally, the religious books called Puranas also accepted all these changes in religion. The Puranas said every person could go to God for help, irrespective of their caste in society. In this lesson, you learned about some of the religious ideas which existed in medieval India. Some of these ideas were not popular among the people of that time because it created some problems in the society. Due to changes in religion, these problems were solved. Welcome to another class of Chapter 8 in your history textbook, Religious Development in Medieval India. Wait, let's first meet this man. Hi, I am Mr. Devotee because I am a follower or a devotee of a god. I show my love or devotion to God. I have given or devoted my life to God. These are 3 new words that you will come across in this part of this chapter. A devotee or a follower, devotion or love. To be devoted is to give your all or most of one's time or resources to a person or activity. Let's look at some of the topics that will be covered in this class. A short and simple description of Bhakti. We will look at the spread of the Bhakti movement in medieval India. We will also look at some of the main ideas of the movement. Let's take a short and simple look into the Bhakti movement. But what is the meaning of the word Bhakti? The meaning of Bhakti is loving devotion to one God of one's choice. So it seems like there's a relationship between the devotee and their God. And how do we describe that relationship? Let's look at point number 2. The devotee expects nothing in return for their devotion to God. This also means that the devotee has to give up all of one's desires, surrender himself or herself. These are some ways to express the devotion of a devotee to their God. You may also ask, there are so many gods and goddesses in medieval India. I cannot worship all of them. So let's look at point number 3. Yes, there are many gods, but only show devotion to one God of one's choice. On this slide, let's look at how did the Bhakti movement spread in medieval India. You can see a blue map of India. The Bhakti movement started in South India in the year 800s and spread to all parts of India by the year 1600. So let's look at the first question. How many years did it take for Bhakti movement to spread across medieval India? 1600s take away 800 is 800 years. And what is the direction of the movement? You can see the arrow showing up on the blue map. It started from the south and spread across all of India. On this slide, we will look at some of the main ideas or main features of the Bhakti movement. Let's look at point number 1, devotion only to one God. Listen to Mr. Devotee. He says, I choose only one God. That's right, he has chosen a single God or deity. He will worship that deity with a pure heart. Look at his red heart. Point number 2 is the focus is more on devotion and individual worship. That is, the focus is more on the individual love to his or her God. And there's less focus on rituals and sacrifices. Now on to the next point. During the Bhakti movement, the devotees, they loved their God so much they wanted to see an image of their God. So the artists and the craftspeople of that time made images of gods and goddesses. Look, Mr. Devotee is talking to Mr. Craftsman. Hello, Mr. Craftsman. Please make a picture or a sculpture of God. Let's look at some more main ideas about the Bhakti movement. Let's read the fourth point. The house of God is called a temple. Yes, the temple is a special place to keep the beautiful image or sculpture of a god or goddess. Wait, Mr. Devotee, where are you going? I am going to the temple to worship God. But what about all the different people in the castes and jatis of the society? Well, that's where point number 5 comes in. Anyone and everyone can come to God. Listen to what Mr. Devotee has to say. God will accept the worship of anyone, rich or poor, man or woman, high caste or low caste. But don't I have to perform the different rituals and sacrifices like the Brahmins? Well, that's where point number 6 comes in. The focus is not on the different rituals and sacrifices, but it's on kindness and the purity of heart and mind. Mr. Devotee adds, look at my pure heart. I show my love for God by doing good works, not by difficult rituals or sacrifices. We have come to the end of today's class. First, we got a simple understanding of the Bhakti movement. It spread all across India, starting from the south, and it took 800 years. We also looked at 6 main ideas which capture the essence of the Bhakti movement. Welcome to another session on the lesson Religious Development in Medieval India. As you read your textbook, you'll come across a word that keeps repeating again and again in this section of the chapter, and that word is philosopher. So first, let's learn what that word means. The first line is, who is a philosopher? Simply put, a philosopher is a thinker who thinks about matters which are important for human life. Let's go to the next point. What did these people think about? They wanted answers to very important questions like, who is God? Where did life come from? Is there life after death? They spoke or preached these ideas to the people, and these ideas brought important changes to society. In this lesson, we will learn about the beginnings of the Bhakti movement in South India and about 2 philosophers from South India who helped spread this movement. And the first philosopher is Shankaracharya from Kerala, and the second philosopher is Ramanujan from Tamil Nadu. So just 3 simple topics, let's jump right in. On this slide, we will be learning about the Bhakti movement in South India. So let us ask 3 questions to help us to understand what is this movement and how did it spread. Who spread the Bhakti movement in South India? Was it a single person? Or maybe it's a group? Were there any songs or books or buildings which tell us about them? Who were the people responsible for making the Bhakti movement popular in South India? Can you see those 2 circles with a plus sign in between? Let's read them. 63 Nayanar Shiva and 12 Alvar Vishnu. Well, what does that mean? It means that Nayanar people, there were 63 of them, and the Alvars, 12 of them, these were the 2 groups of people who spread the Bhakti movement. So, to answer the second question, were they alone? Were they a lone person or were they a large group? It was not a single person, it was a large group of 63 Nayanars and 12 Alvars. Where did they come from? Can you see that blue map? Where does that white arrow point to? It points to the state of Tamil Nadu in South India. Now here's an important fact. The Nayanar and the Alvar were from all castes, even from the untouchables like the Pullayar and the Pavar. Now let's read the yellow dot. These two groups were present during the years between from the year 700 to the year 900. That is the early medieval period. That's almost 200 years. In their time, they wrote poems and set them to music. These were a part of the Sangam literature in Tamil Nadu, and they went from place to place to spread the movement. Well, what happened after they passed away or they died? Did the Bhakti movement continue to grow after that time? Yes, let's read from the green dot. We know that in the years between 1000 and the year 1200, the Chola and the Pandya kings built temples to promote the Bhakti movement. Again, that's for a full 200 years of growth of the Bhakti movement. Let's read further. Hagiographies. They are historical accounts of the Bhakti movement in South India. Well, someone wrote about these two groups of people and how they helped spread the Bhakti movement in South India. Remember what we talked about philosophers? Here on this slide we're going to talk about the first one. So the three questions we should ask is, who is this man? What are the ideas he preached? And what are the changes in society that happened because of these ideas? So let's read the blue dot. Who is the first philosopher? Shankaracharya. Where is he from? The village called Kaladi in Kerala. Can you see the blue map? Look at the white arrow. The white arrow points to the Kerala state in South India. The third point is the pink dot. Let's read. When did he live? In the year 700. About that time is when he lived and he preached about certain ideas. The white dot. What religious ideas did he preach? He preached about Advaita. And what is that? Well, at that time, they believed that Brahma was the final and ultimate reality. And he preached that the world around us was just an illusion or Maya. And all the men on the planet Earth, they were supposed to be united with Brahma. Okay, but when they get united, man will lose his identity. What he preached is that knowledge is the way to this unity or being united with Brahma. Knowledge is the way to salvation. But what are the changes in society that happened because of Shankaracharya? Well, can you make a guess? If you believe that knowledge is the way to God, to being united, to being one with God, what would you do? Well, you'd build schools. And that's exactly what Shankaracharya did. He built schools so that man can gain that knowledge. Let's look at the last point. He built 5 centers of learning: Badrinath, Dwarka, Sringeri, Puri and Kanchipuram. Now we are going to learn about the second philosopher from South India who helped in the spread of the Bhakti movement. So let's begin from the blue dot. Who is this man? It's Ramanuja. The red dot. Where did he live? In Tamil Nadu. Can you see that blue map? Again it points, the white arrow is pointing towards the state of Tamil Nadu. Alright, but do you remember who else was in Tamil Nadu at that time? It's the Alvars and the Nayanars. But as we read on, we can see that he was influenced by the Alvars to follow Vishnu. Alright, the third question is, what religious ideas did he preach? And the name of the idea is called Vishishta Dvaita. Again, just like the previous man, Brahma was considered to be the ultimate reality. But here's the difference. Man and Brahma, they're supposed to be united, but man retains his identity after the union with Brahma. Right? And how do we achieve this? This was considered to be salvation. So how did Ramanuja believe that he could be united with Brahma? This intense love, devotion for Vishnu was the only way. And Vishnu himself will help the devotee to attain that union. Can you guess that if you believe that love is the way of salvation, to be united with God, what would be the impact on society? Can you just make a guess? Well, that's what you can see, that arrow which is pointing to the green dot. That's the impact on society. Let's read. Ramanuja, he wanted social equality. Yes, he wanted everyone to love one another, and he did not want caste-based restrictions on the people who enter the temple. We have come to the end of this section of the chapter, and we have learnt about the beginnings of the Bhakti movement in South India and how it spread through the teachings of two great thinkers, also known as philosophers, Shankaracharya and Ramanujan. Shankaracharya was from Kerala, Ramanujan from Tamil Nadu. Welcome to another class on religious development in medieval India. We learned in the previous class about philosophers. They are people who want answers to questions like, is there a God? How did life begin? And so on. As we go along these classes, maybe you too can think of your own answers to these questions. In this class, we are going to learn about two new philosophers and other religious groups who helped spread the Bhakti movement in South India. Alright, let's learn about the life of another philosopher who lived in medieval India. And what is his name? You can read the title. It says Basavanna. The first point is, where did Basavanna live? He lived in Karnataka. Can you see the map of South India and the white arrow is pointing to the state of Karnataka? Alright, the second point is, when did he live? He lived from AD 1106 to 1168. That, in other words, is the 12th century. What did he believe about God? Let's read the third point. About God, he believed in Shiva, and he also started the Virashaiva movement or Virashaivism. Let's come to the fourth point. Were there other people who thought just like Basavanna? Yes. Alama Prabhu and Akka Mahadevi were other religious leaders who also helped spread Virashaivism. Well, as a philosopher, what did he preach? And that's what the fifth point is all about. During his lifetime, he preached about three things in the society. He advocated for equality of all. He criticized the caste system and how the women in the society were poorly treated. He also preached against rituals and idol worship. On this slide, we will learn about the saints of Maharashtra. Do you know where Maharashtra is? Can you see the map of India? And a white arrow is pointing to the state of Maharashtra. When did the saints of Maharashtra live? Let's read the first point. They lived from the 13th century till the 17th century. What did these saints believe about God? Let's read the second point. They believed in Vishnu, and that Vishnu or God lives in the hearts of the people. What would you do if you believed that God lives and dwells in people? Naturally, you would treat all people alike. And I mean that you will treat all people with respect, rich or poor, man or woman, even people from all castes. So let's read point number 3. The saints, they preached equality among castes and that even the women needed to be treated the same just like the men. And they also showed love by serving the needy and sharing their pain. They did not practice renunciation. What is renunciation? It means to leave the worldly pleasures and to abandon worldly responsibilities. So they did not practice renunciation, but they chose to live with their families. They also did not practice ritual and idol worship, but they sang poems called abhangs in Marathi. In point number 4, you will see that men and women joined the movement, even those from the untouchables. Let's read. The men were called Vaishnava saints, and some of the names were Janishwar, Namdev, Eknath and Tukaram. The women were called Varakari saints, and some of their names were Sakubai, Chokhamela, and they came from the untouchable caste called Mahar. What is this slide about? Let's read the heading. Nathpanthis, Siddharcharas and Yogis. Who are these people? They were religious groups who helped spread the Bhakti movement. They were not individuals but groups of people. And what did these people believe about God? The second point says they believed in Brahma being formless and that oneness leads to salvation. What does that mean? That means they believed God does not have a form or shape and that human beings can be saved only by being one with God. Now, how can anyone become one with God, you may ask? A man or a woman can become one with God only by renunciation and by training the mind and body. Let's read the third point. Renunciation, which means to leave or to not go after the worldly pleasure and worldly responsibilities like family and food. Intense training of mind and body through yoga, breathing exercises and meditation. These groups of people, they also criticized the prevalent rituals and the unequal social order. In the top video, you can see a man is meditating. And in the bottom video, you can see a man is doing a breathing exercise. We have reached the end of today's lesson. Let's review what we have learnt. We learnt about two new thinkers or philosophers, Basavanna from 12th century and the saints of Maharashtra. There were also groups of people like Nathpanthis, Siddharcharas and Yogis who helped spread the Bhakti movement. In the next and final lesson, we will learn about the people who helped spread the Bhakti movement in North India. Welcome to the last class on the chapter Religious Development in Medieval India. In this section, we will learn about 6 people who were the religious leaders who helped spread the Bhakti movement in North India. We can see their pictures below. I will read their names beginning from the first row. And their names are Tulsidas, Surdas, Shankaradeva, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ravidas and Mirabai. And on your right is the very colorful map of North India. The first Bhakti saint we shall learn about is Tulsidas. And can you see the picture of Tulsidas on the right side of the slide? So let's look at the first point. Which god did he follow? He worshipped Lord Rama. The second point, how did he show his devotion to Lord Rama? Well, he composed a famous poem or an epic called Ramcharitra Manas. It is written in Awadhi, which is an Eastern Hindi language spoken in northern India, and it is primarily spoken in present-day Uttar Pradesh. So we know that Tulsidas is from Uttar Pradesh. But where is Uttar Pradesh? Can you see the map of India? And the arrow, a blue arrow, is pointing towards Uttar Pradesh. Let's learn an interesting fact about Tulsidas. Unlike the religious leaders we learned before, Tulsidas accepted the religious practices of his time. Look at point number 4. What changes did he want to see in society? He wanted to see religion easily accessible to all people. That is, from any caste in society. Even all women must be allowed to freely worship God. And can you see the people on your right? There are men, there are women, even little children, rich and poor. And they're all having equal access and easy access to God. And they're all very happy about it. On this slide, we will learn about another Bhakti saint called Surdas. Can you see the picture of Surdas on the right? Alright, let's learn about which god did he follow. He worshipped Krishna. In your textbook, the phrase used to describe Surdas's devotion to Lord Krishna is ardent devotee. Second point, how did he express his ardent devotion to God? We can see some of his works are Sur Sagara, Sura Saravali, and Sahitya Lahari. On this slide, we are going to learn about the Bhakti saint called Shankaracharya. But do not get confused, this is not Shankaracharya, who was a Bhakti saint of South India. Can you see the picture of Shankaracharya at the middle of the page? And let's look at the first point. Where was he from? He was from Assam. And where is Assam? It's in northeast India. And you can see the map of India, and a blue arrow is pointing to the state of Assam. Point number 2. Who did he worship? He worshipped Vishnu as God. Point number 3. How did he show his devotion to Vishnu? He wrote many plays and poems in Assamese, which is the language of Assam. He also established houses where people gathered for religious discussions, recitations, collective prayer, and other social functions. These houses were called namghars. This practice still continues. On this slide, we will learn about a Bhakti saint called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Can you see the picture of him on the middle of the page? And let's learn about where was he from. He was from Bengal. And where is Bengal? You can see the map, and a blue arrow is pointing towards the state of Bengal. Point number 2. Who did he worship? He worshipped Krishna as God. Point number 3. What did he preach during his time? He preached against caste system, the inequality between castes in the society. But he advocated for all to join, everyone to join the bhakti through singing and dancing. On this slide, we will learn about Ravidas, another saint of the Bhakti movement who helped spread the movement in North India. Well, who was Ravidas? He was a great saint. And point number 2 is, which god did he follow? He was an ardent devotee of Krishna. Point number 3. Let's learn about one interesting fact about Ravidas. One unique fact that no other saint that we have learned about has. He was from the untouchables caste. The caste of the untouchables, which is the most underprivileged and the most troubled or oppressed section of society. On the slide, you can also see a picture of the Bhakti saint Ravidas. On this slide, we will learn about the Bhakti saint whose name is Mirabai. And the first point is, when did she live? To be precise, she lived from 1499 to 1547. But what does that mean when you think about the timeline of this chapter? Well, that means she lived in the 16th century, which is the end of the medieval period of the Indian subcontinent. Here are some more interesting facts about Mirabai. Let's read point number 2. She was the wife of the Crown Prince of Mewar. And where is Mewar? It's in the state of Rajasthan. And can you see the map of India, and a blue arrow is pointing to the state of Rajasthan? Well, let's continue reading point number 2. She gave up her life of luxury to become an ardent devotee of Lord Krishna. And what else? She was a disciple of the Bhakti saint Ravidas. And point number 3 is, how did she express her devotion to God? She composed many devotional songs called bhajans. It would be nice to listen to a bhajan, right? Well, here it is. Mero Radha Ramana Giridhari, Giridhari Shama Bhanabari, Mero Radha Ramana Giridhari. And point number 4, what did she teach or preach during her time? It is through her songs that she openly challenged the norms of the upper caste. Well, for this, she was very well known among the people. And so they preserved the memory of this Bhakti saint. We have come to the end of the chapter on religious developments in medieval India. And what have we learned in this class? We learnt that the spread of the Bhakti movement in North India was started in the 14th century and ended by the 16th century. So within a span of 200 years, the Bhakti movement spread to all of North India because of the life and the works of 6 Bhakti saints, whose names are Tulsidas, Surdas, Shankaradeva, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Ravidas, and Mirabai.